I've been working as a freelance land surveyor for about 15 years, and most of my jobs take me into extremely remote areas where I can go days without seeing another person. It's something I've always preferred, the isolation, the quiet, the feeling of being completely cut off from everything else. At least, that's how I used to feel before an assignment about 4 years ago changed the way I look at being alone in the wilderness. I had been hired to survey boundary markers on a parcel of land deep in the mountains near the Clearwater region in Idaho, and even getting there required a 6-mile hike through rough terrain. Like I always do, I filed my route with the local ranger station, packed a week's worth of supplies, and set up camp once I reached the designated area. The first day went exactly how I expected. I located several markers, logged everything carefully, and made it back to camp before dark without any issues. The forecast had called for cold weather with light snow, and that's pretty much what I got. It was manageable, nothing out of the ordinary for that kind of work. But by the second day, the conditions started to shift. The snowfall became heavier than predicted, and the terrain quickly turned dangerous, with fresh snow covering rocks and ice underneath. Visibility dropped, and every step started to feel uncertain, but I convinced myself to keep going because the next marker was only about a mile away. Looking back, that decision still bothers me. I should have turned back, waited it out, or even packed up and left while I still had the chance. Instead, I pushed forward into conditions that were clearly getting worse. The ground beneath me was unstable, hidden hazards everywhere, and I had to carefully pick my way across icy slopes and uneven terrain. It only took one mistake. My boot hit a patch of ice I never saw, and I lost my footing instantly. I slid down a short embankment, maybe 15 feet, before managing to grab onto a tree root and stop myself. I was lucky it wasn't worse, but the pain in my right ankle was immediate and intense. When I tried to stand, I realized something was seriously wrong. I could barely put weight on my ankle without wincing in pain, and it was clear I wouldn't be moving normally anytime soon. At that point, the job didn't matter anymore. No boundary marker was worth getting stranded out there injured. I decided to abandon the rest of the work and head back to camp as quickly as I could manage. The hike back was slow and frustrating, every step sending sharp pain through my leg, and all I could think about was how careless I had been. A few minutes into the hike back, I noticed something that didn't sit right with me: boot prints in the snow ahead of me. They looked relatively fresh, which I could tell from how defined the edges were despite the ongoing snowfall. At first, I assumed it was a hunter or maybe someone connected to the landowner checking the property. It wasn't unusual to run into people occasionally, even in remote areas like that, so I didn't think too much of it. I just kept moving, focusing on getting back to camp before it got dark. As the light started to fade, I began hearing sounds behind me. At first, I brushed it off as normal forest noise, the wind, shifting snow, maybe even an animal moving through the trees. But the more I listened, the more it started to sound like footsteps. I stopped walking, and after a brief delay of a second or two, the sound stopped as well. That was the first moment I felt something was off. I stood there listening, trying to hear anything else, but there was nothing except the wind and falling snow. When I started walking again, the sound didn't return immediately, which made me question whether I had imagined it. That doubt didn't last long. A few minutes later, the footsteps came back. I kept turning around, scanning the trees, but I couldn't see anything. The forest was dense enough that someone could easily stay hidden, and that realization made everything worse. Then I heard something else, a faint metallic sound coming from somewhere off to my left. It didn't make sense. There shouldn't have been anything out there capable of making that kind of noise. That's when I realized I hadn't been paying attention to the footprints anymore. When I looked down, they were gone, and when I looked toward the trees, I saw another set of tracks running parallel to mine, just a short distance away. Whoever had been ahead of me was no longer in front. They were moving alongside me, hidden within the tree line. Panic started to set in, and against my better judgment, I called out, asking if anyone was there. There was no response. I waited, hoping for some kind of explanation, but nothing came. I knew I needed to get back to camp, but with my injured ankle, I couldn't move fast. I kept going anyway, trying to ignore the pain, trying not to think about the fact that someone was out there with me. Eventually, I reached my campsite just as darkness fully set in, but even inside my tent, I didn't feel safe. When I heard footsteps circling outside, slow and deliberate, I knew I wasn't alone. And when I finally stepped outside and saw the old man standing at the edge of the trees, silently watching me before telling me I was a lucky man, I realized just how close I might have come to something far worse. I've lived in Alaska for most of my life, and by the time I was in my late 20s, I had built a career working as a wilderness guide. I spent years navigating harsh environments, dealing with unpredictable weather, and leading people through terrain that could easily kill you if you weren't prepared. Because of that, I developed a strong sense of confidence in my abilities out there. I didn't get lost, I didn't panic, and I trusted my experience. At least, that's what I believed until something happened about 3 years ago that completely shattered that confidence. At the time, my boyfriend Randy and I had planned a snowmobile trip between two remote cabins about 60 miles apart. It was a route we had done before, and we were both experienced enough that it didn't feel particularly risky. The plan was simple: ride to the first cabin, stay the night, continue to the second, and then head back home over the course of 4 days. The first day went smoothly, exactly as expected. We reached the second cabin by late afternoon, ate some terrible freeze-dried meals, and spent the evening relaxing. There was nothing to suggest that anything was about to go wrong. The next morning, everything changed. When I woke up, there was a full-blown blizzard outside, something that hadn't been predicted at all. The wind was intense, visibility was terrible, and the conditions were far worse than what we had prepared for. We had enough supplies to wait it out, and in hindsight, that's exactly what we should have done. But instead, we decided to push forward, thinking we could handle it. That decision set everything in motion. Not long after we started moving, things went bad. The snow and wind made it difficult to see, so Randy took the lead while I followed his track. One moment he was riding normally, and the next, his snowmobile flipped and came down on top of him. I rushed over, but the damage was obvious immediately. His leg was bent in a way that legs aren't supposed to bend. It was severe, and there was no way he was getting back on his own machine. I tried getting him onto mine, but it didn't work. He couldn't hold himself steady, and every attempt only caused him more pain. That's when we both realized the situation we were in. Staying there meant risking hypothermia, but moving him wasn't possible. I managed to get a weak connection on the satellite phone and sent out our coordinates, though I wasn't even sure the message went through. In the end, there was only one option left. I had to leave him there, with as much shelter and gear as I could provide, and ride out alone to find help. It wasn't something we debated. We both knew it had to be done. Riding alone through the blizzard was one of the most disorienting experiences of my life. I relied heavily on my GPS, but even then, the terrain didn't seem to match what I expected. After about 45 minutes, I started to feel like something was off, like I wasn't heading in the right direction. Then I saw smoke in the distance. At that point, I didn't question it. Smoke meant warmth, shelter, and possibly a way to contact help, so I turned toward it. The structure I found wasn't either of the cabins we knew. It was smaller, partially buried in snow, but there was clearly someone living there. The fire was going, there was food out, and everything looked recently used. But no one was inside. That alone was unsettling, but what I found next made it worse. There was a map with various locations circled, including the cabins we had stayed at, along with dates written beside them. Next to it was a notebook filled with descriptions of people, their movements, and details that suggested someone had been watching and documenting others for a long time. The moment I realized what I was looking at, the entire place stopped feeling like shelter. It felt wrong, like I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. I was about to leave when I heard a scream coming from beneath the floor. It was a woman, screaming in pure terror, like she was being attacked. The sound was so sudden and so intense that I didn't even think. I ran. I got on my snowmobile and left as fast as I could, not looking back even once. I eventually reached the real cabin and called for help, and Randy was rescued just in time. But when authorities searched for the place I described, they found nothing. No cabin, no tracks, nothing at all. And to this day, I still don't know what I walked into, or what I left behind under that floor. When I was in high school, there was a girl named Sienna who always stood out to me. She wasn't loud or popular, but there was something about her that felt different, almost unsettling. Most people avoided her, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Somehow, I ended up asking her out one day, and to my surprise, she said yes without hesitation. She planned everything, including a hike at a trail I had never heard of. When we got there, the place felt isolated, with barely any people around. At first, things were normal. She was actually more talkative than usual, which made the whole situation feel even stranger, like I was seeing a completely different side of her. After a while, we reached a fork in the trail, and she chose a direction instantly, even though she claimed she had never been there before. The path became narrower and less maintained the deeper we went. At some point, she told me to walk ahead. A few minutes later, I realized I couldn't hear her footsteps anymore. When I turned around, she was gone. I went back looking for her, calling her name, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Then I heard movement in the trees and assumed it was her trying to scare me. But when I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't her, it was a man. Then I noticed another one nearby, blocking my way back, and that's when I ran. They chased me through the woods, and one of them even managed to grab me before I broke free and kept running. I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot, where her car was still there. Moments later, she casually walked out of the trees like nothing had happened. The way she acted made no sense, and to this day, I can't shake the feeling that none of it was random, and that she might have led me straight into it.